can have a goal or a desire or a plan, but it requires some work.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the next video here with Christopher Harris talking about temporary assignments and all the incredible things that have been happening over the past few weeks and months with regards to my book. Thank you guys so much for supporting me and supporting the message. More importantly, not just supporting me, but supporting the message of reinvention and change and personal transition. As I've been saying consistently, if you don't change, you get stuck. And beyond that, regardless of race or class or culture or background or education, everyone is either in a transition, just coming out of a transition, or on their way into a transition. And so I've been having some amazing folks on here with me. And today is no less than a stellar person on the line with me. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not introducing him to the world. He's already known all over the world. But Charles, thank you so much for being on today, man.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah. So Charles is the founder, chief creative officer for Ideation. He's also the author of this incredible book, How to Move Ideas to Execution. You have a good idea, now what? I would encourage you guys, I have read it. If you look through my book, of course, I've got lots of highlighting in my book here. And I may have to order a new one at some point, Charles, because it's hard to kind of start making my notes out here a little bit. But I love it. Yeah, I reference the book on a regular basis. So really fast, Charles, just as a way of introduction, I know I kind of told the name of the company, but just tell everybody really quickly what you do, the work that you do and what Ideation is about.
Absolutely. Thanks again for having me. Our company Ideation is really an execution company. So we're a hybrid company of both consultants, strategy consultants, innovation folks, product development specialists, but we also have a creative team inside. So it's kind of more of a blended between a convergence of a strategy consulting firm as well as a creative agency. But the core thing that we deliver is we help executives and leaders get stuff done. So execution is really our end game.
That's awesome. And so really quickly, in light of that, why do you feel like there's such a huge disconnect between the idea and the execution? What causes that huge disconnect?
Yeah, it can be multiple reasons. Sometimes it's not really even the good idea, but there may be cultural barriers to execution. There may be decision-making barriers where if you are part of a corporation, there's so many tiers of approvals that sometimes projects just get stuck. And statistically, I think over 90% of innovation projects or new ideas, if you will, within companies fail. Wow. Some of that is the nature of ideation and working on new innovative ideas, but there are so many other factors. Some of it's just a bad idea. Others are good ideas that die within the culture of an organization. And so we help kind of navigate through what those challenges look like.
You said 90%.
Yeah, that's conservative. Some people say as high as 94+%. Wow. Very few ideas really see the light of day. And so for us, on one hand, it's great because we'll always have clients because most people need help executing. Regardless of the size of the business, a lot of stuff don't get done.
Wow. So let's jump in, Charles. You know, the message of my book, as we've been talking about, I reached out to you a couple months ago and sort of shared with you the book was getting ready to come out and all of that. Yeah. The message here is about change and transition and helping people to pursue their purpose and what does that look like. So really quickly, tell us a little bit about your story in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Lots of change and transition there. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, my whole life has been about transition. I came to the United States when I was 5 years old. So my parents, who had their own respective careers in Korea, left the country, and we came to the U.S. when I was 5. So all I can remember growing up was they were constantly entrepreneurs. And so we moved from New York to Los Angeles. Fortunately for them, I mean, we started with nothing. I remember, I tell this story often, it's like, I remember getting woken up really early in the morning so that my father could drop off my mother at a garment factory to do work. And these are people who had their own design companies and so forth in Korea. And so we had like a car with 4 doors, but 2 of the windows of the doors were missing. So they would literally kind of, I don't know if it was saran wrap or something, but they would just kind of tape up the door. So we started with like 0. Wow. And to see them kind of hustle in a country that they did not know the language, they still really don't know till today. But to start several different restaurant franchises that became super successful in Los Angeles as well as in Korea. And to see them go from nothing, but it came at a price. It cost them their marriage. It cost them, I think, at some level, a relationship with me. But through it all, what they taught me is if you really want to go after something and you have all of these challenges, it doesn't matter. You can make it if you put in the hard work. And so we moved a lot. I think I moved maybe 9 times between first grade and my senior in high school. And it was all related around their business, changing from city to city, building things. And so transition has been just kind of a natural part of my life.
Yeah. So let's dig into that a little bit more, Charles. Talk about some of the downsides. I mean, you just said something really powerful. Yeah. That transition, in some ways, it came at a cost with regards to, your parents' marriage and some parental child disconnect there with the 3 of you guys or what have you. Don't know if you have siblings or not, but what's some of the other costs that you think that are transferable that you experience, but you think other people experience as well in their transitions?
Yeah, I think in the area of transition, because you are focused on your own life and maybe your own immediate nuclear family. I mean, every decision creates kind of a domino effect. And if you're, say, the head of the household, you're going to have to make decisions that impact maybe your spouse. These days, it's definitely a collaborative decision. And your kids have to kind of go along with whatever you decide. And so it comes at a weight. I mean, I think the great thing about family is everyone, if they sense that whoever's making decisions, whether it's one parent or both, single parents, I've had both. So you are willing to go along with whatever is best for the family. But those are heavy decisions. And I think some of the, when people get in trouble, sometimes they're making career decisions and are not thinking intentionally enough about their other family members, their friends and family. They're not really considering that their decision actually has ramifications for their relationships and others who are in, because no decision happens in a vacuum. I'm not just making a business decision. My business decision impacts my personal life, and my personal life impacts maybe the future of where my kids will go, what they will do. And so transition just comes with all of that. And people know that, but in the moment they may forget the bigger picture because they're focused on that one decision set right in front of them.
No, that's incredible. I actually, I mean, that what you just said is one of the reasons that really was a catalyst for me writing the book, because, as I was navigating transitions in my own life, like you said, that every decision is connected to other things, but in those moments and in those seasons, because of the emotions that come with all of that, you just get so drawn into the moment that you forget, okay, what are the other spaces here? And so there's actually a chapter in the book where I ask the question, what is your capacity, right? Which deals with those other dimensions that you have to consider. There's about 6 or 7 that I talk about in the book that you have to consider when you're navigating transition. So now on the other side of some of this, and I mean, your company as an entrepreneur, I'm sure you guys still always deal with transition and the ebbs and flows and issues. But what's some of the real practical wisdom that you've gained that you could probably pass on to others to say, you know what, I came here when I was 5. I've seen my parents reinvent themselves. I've had to constantly reinvent myself. Now I'm a parent. So, what does all of that look like? Because I know you have two children yourself as well now. So
Yeah. So I would, I was been really fortunate that in my career anyway, it's been a really good relationship between myself and my wife. And I think what you see in life, for example, in the space of entrepreneurs, you see the real successful ones, and they've done plenty of studies on this, is that successful entrepreneurs aren't necessarily more risk takers, but they're very calculated in the risk taking. And so it's not that they just know it's going to work and they're just going to jump into the darkness. They really actually do their homework and try to navigate according to what they actually can know as they move forward. And so for me and my wife, what we've done in transition that I think we've done well is before starting ideation, I gave us 18 months to really save, kind of bootstrap within the home. Fortunately, she had a great career at a corporation. And so we were able to kind of bootstrap, cut everything, and kind of gave myself a deadline for the transition too. So I didn't want it to be an endless transition. If ideation was going to work, it was going to work. So I worked primarily, I didn't quit my day job. I worked from around 9 to 10 p.m. when the kids went to bed, when they were younger, to about 2, 3 in the morning, about 4 days a week. And that gave me an extra 4 to 5 hours 4 times. So it's in the ballpark of 20 extra hours to build this business. I did that for 18 months. So we didn't really travel 18 months. Yep. So that was kind of the commitment to say, hey, if we can save up money, one, that would minimize, if anything, I wanted to build a company without borrowing money from anybody or giving up equity. I wanted to make a business that we would be kind of debt-free and own. And so that's a kind of a team effort to know that it is going to be hard for 18 weeks. And I asked her, can you give me permission to just focus on this and forgive me ahead of time for all the sacrifice we're going to have to make as a family in order to kind of actualize this dream.
Yeah. I didn't anticipate that our conversation would go in this direction a little bit, but I think it's healthy because it sounds like, maybe part of what I'm hearing is that some of the foundations or the experiences that you had in your childhood now really guide you as a husband, which I think, as a husband, we are busy, especially type A personalities or, visionaries or what have you. We're focused on the business and focused on the work. But I think there's a lot of great value and wisdom as a husband to consider how we make decisions and engage our spouses in the process of the decision making.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, your business should be hopefully secondary to your marriage.
Yeah.
If you're in a faith context, your ministry should be secondary to your marriage. Yeah. I think most visionaries, they forget that. And I feel like at the end of the day, businesses will come and go. I may have a handful of other companies. We're investing in companies now. So I'll have a small stake in multiple companies over the years. That will come and go. But I'm married to this person for eternity. Yeah. And so that commitment has to become priority. And at some point, people have to come to the realization that as exciting as a new venture might be, is when the lights are off, no one's watching you on social. What you truly have is people will forget you. I think that's true, through when you read Ecclesiastes, people will forget you. Yeah. But the people that won't forget you are the people you have to invest in.
Wow.
And so I can't imagine running a business apart. In fact, I've had a good friend who was very successful. He still is. But it came at the price of his marriage. And one of his regrets is he wished that he would have more integrated conversations with his spouse about the business into their, marriage, or even maybe have her come on board. And so I think that's where, to be clear, is at the end of the day, ideation could go away and it's okay as long as my relationship with my wife is strong.
Yeah. it's interesting. When I first got married, I was preaching then already, but when I first got married, a mentor of mine shared with me and he at the time, even, I mean, almost 2 decades ago, but even at the time, he was traveling very extensively. He was an itinerant minister and all
Yeah.
of that. But he said to me, he said, man, I actually get my wife's permission on every speaking engagement before I go. And then he told me the why behind that. He said, if I go off and, I'm preaching or I'm traveling, and, for the most part, when somebody's inviting you to preach, they're helping to create an atmosphere that is ready to receive the message that you're carrying. But when I come back home, if my wife doesn't even want to talk to me because I've been gone or because there's a disconnect there, then it actually is more strain on me to even get on the plane to come back home. So,
Absolutely.
I kind of created the concept then that, ever since then, that even if I get an invitation for a leadership conference or a speaking engagement, even, as I'm traveling a little bit with this book, and going to churches or organizations, my wife is very, very intricately involved in the calendar and the planning of that. And, and even, I'll use this term, lots of husbands may not like this, but again, I get her permission, hey, are you okay with being gone, 5 times this month or whatever? And then that way there is complete buy-in to the whole process. So I thank you for sharing that. With very insightful. So let me ask this entrepreneurial question, right? So you talked about the 18 months that you guys built up there and the capacity and right before the launch and, working 4 extra hours a night, 20 hours a week, et cetera, et cetera. What's that fine line between faith and foolishness as an entrepreneur when you're in transition? What's that look like, and how do you navigate that, and how do you manage that real, I got to step out on faith, but also I need to make sure I'm managing the facts,
Yeah, I would start off with the facts first. I think doing the hard work of understanding your market, understanding where you're going to, getting some good initial, I write in my book, is you got to write stuff down so you have a point of reference to develop. It's amazing how much more you can get done if you're actually writing things down on paper. So even as you're meeting people for advice, you have an executive summary of some kind to just kind of throw ideas out. So it's not just coffee talk. In fact, we've seen in some of our studies that it's detrimental to just talk about your idea all the time, because it tricks your brain into thinking you're actually doing something about it, and you're less likely to actually execute. So the more you talk about it without writing it down, you're less likely to actually actualize it. So the percentages are working against you because you're too busy talking about it versus actually executing on it. And so, I think starting with doing your homework, building out some semblance of a business model, understanding the market you're getting into, whether or not people will respond to it, prototyping some of your ideas, getting feedback. And this applies not just to for-profit businesses, but even for ministries, is maybe instead of building a community center, start off by testing out, prototyping a program at a local community center to see if it works before building an entire building around it. Wow. So I think it's just kind of that notion of hey, let's build towards a goal versus having to launch with everything in place. So that's probably a good balance of, you could kind of mitigate your risk by prototyping and launching in segments instead of the whole thing.
So we don't always have to launch big. We can start small.
No, right. In fact, launching big, it just welcomes so much risk. It's not, unless you're just independently super wealthy, that's probably not a good stewardship of your resources anyway.
Yeah. So Charles, I got to ask you then. So how does Mr. Ideation take notes? What does he use a Moleskine? Is he electronic? Does he use Evernote? What the tool you use?
My go-to is Evernote. Depends on what I'm taking notes. Sometimes it's just straight to a Word document. Every so often I will use a Moleskine. I'm just waiting for the iPad Pro 2 to come out, and then I'll probably switch over to that. I've tested out, and so I really like to be able to do both on one device. So hopefully when that next iteration comes out, I'll be a customer.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, so let me ask this. So when you think about all the things that you've seen since you've been in the United States, trends, things that have transpired, technology has taken off and is moving at lightning speed. You talked about just now the itineration of another device, all those kinds of dynamics. What are one or two things that you just did not see coming that has become a social phenomenon or an issue in organizations or with leadership that has just kind of caught you by surprise, even where you're kind of like, man, I don't know if I saw that coming. Or maybe I saw that coming, but I didn't realize it was going to be like this or just whatever.
Yeah, I think for me, once you're kind of in the technology space and you're in kind of the startup world, no new technology really like surprises me. I feel like I expected that we would get into an age of, driverless cars and Internet of Things and virtual reality, augmented reality. So, but what does surprise me, and it shouldn't, having done this for multiple years now, is how even no matter the size of the company is, everyone's trying to figure out how to innovate better. And part of that is how to execute better. And it's amazing that pretty significant leaders still struggle with getting stuff done. And so it may seem so fundamental. I just assumed everybody knew how to do it. I actually went to therapy because I was teaching full-time at a university. I was at a college. I was helping to plant 3 churches, actually, part of teams like that. I was co-founded a nonprofit that was really taking off. I was getting hired by brands to handle their guerrilla marketing. I was speaking all over the country, and I went into therapy. And what I realized is I had confused competency with calling, and everything was scaling. And so what I realized is through it all, the one thing that I was really good at, and this is where I think maybe encouraging for your audience is like, sometimes your greatest strength is that which you overlook and take for granted, I should say. And what I realized is I took for granted my ability to actually get things done and scale. And I assumed everybody else did that. So the most surprising thing for me is that a company like ours came to an existence, and I quickly realized, man, people really need our help. And so that was been kind of a surprising thing. It's less about the technology, but more about people. Maybe they're just too busy to think about themselves, too busy to really map out how to get things done. And so for me, that's been the biggest surprise is like, these are phenomenal leaders that still need help executing. And the smart ones know enough to go ask for help. So that gives them the competitive edge.
I know we don't have time to really unpack all of that, but tell me a little bit more that competency versus calling thing. I think you just dropped a wisdom grenade on us. What is there research or there books or there materials on that we can kind of go and do some digging on that? Are you working on a book for that?
No. I think it's just a simple concept is that I think those of us who come from a faith perspective is that we talk about this calling, which comes from the Latin word vocare, which is like this vocation, right? Yeah. Is that because we're so busy trying to maximize impact, reach more people, do more good, I think we can find ourselves very shallow in the areas that we do good in. In other words, we can do a lot of good. I've known you for years now, and I know you can do multiple areas really well. But the question is has God really called you to do all of those things? Because you can't do all of those things with a level of excellence where you're best in the world in all of those areas. So the question is just because you know how to do it doesn't necessarily logically follow that God wants you to do that. So because of that, I think I realized, man, I can do all of these things, but what's that one thing that I'm best in, maybe not the entire world, but best in my world at, that I can do night and day, and it gives me like great energy, and I'm willing to develop that. So it's like, I think, folks like Erwin McManus, right? He's a good friend. And I remember talking to him about writing books. And he's like, hey, I wrote this book in a few weeks. I'm like, what? And then he basically said, look, this is what God's called me to do.
Mm.
And I do it well. And I'm not saying I'm the best writer in the world, but for me, it comes naturally. So sometimes like those natural things we may overlook because we assume everybody else knows how to do it.
Mm.
But for me, it was execution. And I realized, man, the reason I assume everybody else can do it, and so because it's so natural to me, and the reason it's so natural to me is maybe God's calling is aligned to that gifting that He's given me,
So
and doing that is more productive.
you're really talking about sweet spot then.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's incredible. So, I want to honor your time, Charles, and man, I could talk to you for another 5 hours. So, I've got 3 more questions for you really quickly. The first question is, so people are listening to you talk about this execution, and it comes easy for you, and you've been assuming that other people do it so well. And, if people are like me and they're watching this, the light bulbs in my head are going off. So obviously, again, I'm going to encourage everybody, go get Charles's book because he talks about a lot of this stuff in his book. But do you do personal coaching or just business coaching or organizations coaching? Or if somebody wanted to figure out how to take what you're saying to the next level, what would you recommend?
Yeah. I only, well, for me personally, through our company, we only take on 1 to 3 like coaching type of engagement. So we do like personal executive coaching, especially with like high impact leaders who want to get serious about what they do and begin to kind of scale that. But I also believe that it's one of those things where if you choose to discipline yourself and commit to something, so prove it through your commitment, we're not trying to win. We say in our company, like, we don't win arguments through words. We win arguments through execution.
Wow.
So the way you win is you get it done. So, I'm not interested in arguing about which paradigm is better, which philosophy is better. But the proof is in the pudding, right? So if you can get it done, you can do that. And there's plenty of like, obviously motivational books that can get you there. I mean, if you really want to challenge your thinking, there's a great book called Bold, and it's BOLD, and it's a book just talks about exponential innovation. So it's more like the Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos of the world, thinking about leapfrogging solutions. So it's not just incremental change, but really getting out there. Or, a book like, it's a little bit older now, but Seth Godin has definitely spoken into the kind of how we form as a company. And he has a book called Tribes from years ago that's still really good, to maybe kind of consider, how do you build a base? So for our company, we built our, if you will, our tribe before we showed up with services through our conferences we did around the country. So by the time we showed up 2 years later with services, we already had a customer base. We already had a referral base built in. So we kind of approached building our company a little bit differently. So things like that might be very helpful.
It's incredible. All right. So you actually started getting into the other 2 questions that I have left for you. So who inspires you? And what are the 3 books that have been the game changers for you, that you've read and a little bit impactful?
Practically who inspires me is like the small business owner. So when I'm ever at cities, I like to go to mom and pop type of shops, whether it's a coffee place or whether it's a bookstore. I love the fact that people have to hustle so much to be around for so long. So whenever I see a sign in the store that says established 1983 or something like that, I have a propensity to kind of walk in. I want to see, it's not a perfect place. It's not Amazon. It's not Google. But something about being around for 30 years is very inspiring for me, that, they've been at it. They're still there. They probably would have closed a dozen times, but for regardless of the economy, they kept fighting through it to be around for so long. So that's very inspiring. Books, some of the books that I mentioned there, a book I read years ago from Gary Vaynerchuk called Crush It, just kind of lit a fire under me to actually go out and do something. I think there's any books on the sharing economy. I think that's where a lot of businesses are going, or sometimes they call it the collaborative economy. If you just Google that, there's several books in that space. Books on innovation are really good. Clayton Christensen from Harvard has a book called Innovator's Dilemma, or I forget the exact title. Or he's great when it comes to disruptive innovation. So there's many books in all type of spaces, and overall, I recommend people to read outside of their industry. So if you're in ministry, I would say read books outside of ministry. Go to at least one conference a year outside of ministry, and get in the room with people who don't think like you. I think that's a huge benefit, and that's how often innovation is sparked.
That's incredible. So, I definitely can appreciate what you've shared about companies that can hustle and that stay around 20, 30, 40, 50 years, what have you. Are there some particular people that consistently you look to that when I connect with these folks, they're going to light my fire, they're going to challenge my thinking, they're going to provoke thought, they're going to just kind of push me?
Definitely folks like Seth Godin continue to do that. I love his blog. They're like literally like 4 sentences sometimes, but it's really gold. He's very thoughtful. I love people like Nicholas Kristof, who writes for the New York Times, on some of his views that are happening politically as well as around the world. I mean, it's, for me, like I jump around so much from place to place and just try to find really good writing. Sure. So that's kind of the space that I live in is. And then I'm always open to trying to find folks who are definitely under the radar, that hasn't, there's a great book called The Mesh. I forget her name, but she talks about the sharing economy, and that's really good. And so anything I can get my hands on is worth reading for sure.
Gotcha.
And then if there's good subscriptions, magazine-wise or journal-wise, I think like the Harvard Business Review is a must for anybody trying to do business. It's probably one of the few publications I kind of read cover to cover.
Yeah. Yeah, I love getting their emails. I get their emails on a regular basis, and just that snippet, that weekly, daily snippet that they send to the Harvard Business Review. So, Charles, this has been absolutely amazing. The most precious thing that I think people have oftentimes is time. And so I appreciate you taking the time today to be a part of this conversation about change and reinvention and transition. Really quickly, if people want to connect with you, how do they get connected with you?
They can probably just find me online. My website is Charles, the letter T as in Tom, Lee.com, or just Google Charles Lee Ideation. They can find me most places. So, yeah.
And he's on Facebook, he's on Twitter, he's on Instagram, so you'll be able to connect with him there. Go get his book, y'all. Go get his book. And, Charles is big. He's in the big league, so you can go, and his books are on the bookshelf probably any bookstore. Mine, you have to go get my book off of Amazon or Barnes & Noble. So go check it out. We've been talking about temporary assignments over the last few weeks and months, guys. Been absolutely incredible. Thank you guys for everybody that's been hitting me up on social media, those that have been following my YouTube channel with all of these videos. Your feedback, your insight, your growth, the questions that you've been asking have been challenging me and have been very encouraging. So thank you guys for tuning in. I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Charles, thank you again for being with us today.
Thanks so much for your time.
You can have a goal or a desire or a plan, but it requires some work.